afternoon. How y'all doing? Woo! Oh, you really got to work on that. How are we doing? Thank you. Welcome to the I don't know how many annual committers panel. It's one of my favorite things that we do. This is probably one of the largest turnouts we've had too. Normally people depart, and I think I'm very happy and delighted to see how many people stuck around to see what these folks have to say. So I'm going to do some really quick introductions. We don't normally have 11 people up here, so I'm going to do it really, really quick. This is Diego Molina. This is Manoj Kumar. Tomer Steinfeld. Alexei Barantsev. Simon Stewart. I don't know who that guy is. Titus Fortner. Deb Nicholson from Conservancy. Jim Evans. Ashley Hansberger. Andreas Tolfsen. This is your panel of Selenium committers.
And steering committee.
Welcome, everyone.
I'm sorry? And project leadership committee.
Oh, project leadership committee as well, yes. So we're going to kick this off with some questions that have been submitted by folks in the audience. I didn't want to project them because I've done this kind of thing before where people just read this all day, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to read this to you. You'll see the question if you're having trouble hearing me, understanding me. It'll be repeated by the white coat captioners, and they will wonderfully say what we're doing here, right? So let's start right off. Here's an interesting kind of aggressive question. Will Selenium 4 really solve all the compatibility problems across the browsers and mobile browsers?
No. Of course not. The standardization process we went through with the W3C is an attempt to try and address some of those concerns. Now, fundamentally, the problem is that each of the browser engines are implemented in different ways and have their own mechanisms for doing things. And when you go onto mobile, it becomes like even worse, right? And even more confusing. And that's why we have Selenium in the first place, right? So you can write your tests in a way where you go, this should work on every browser, and then you can run it on every browser, right? And that's why we offer that capability. If all you needed to do was run on one browser and then it would work everywhere, we'd be back in like the IE6 days, right? And it would be terrible, and none of us would be happy.
Yeah. Cool. Makes sense. There's another question that I guess is peripherally related, is should testers use pure Selenium JavaScript instead of DOM wrappers, i.e. drivers, when everything on modern web pages is all JavaScript? Do you advocate, so should testers use pure Selenium JavaScript instead of drivers? Because everything on modern web pages is already JavaScript.
So you're saying, should they use simply just JavaScript to automate their
That's the question.
I see. My opinion is no. And this is simply my opinion. But there are certain things that when you do them like a user would do in a browser, interacting with elements in certain ways, clicking on them, for example. There are things that happen in the browser that don't happen when you do the same thing with just calling the JavaScript method inside the browser. And it's really kind of difficult to get exactly the same fidelity with just JavaScript inside the browser than you do using a library that's outside the browser's JavaScript sandbox that does native event type things and user interactions with the browser in a more native way. In fact, that's kind of the whole reason that WebDriver was invented in the first place, is because Selenium RC did exactly that. It works solely within the JavaScript sandbox, and that was incredibly limiting for some of the things that we needed to do for testing.
Now, one of the nice things is, if you're writing everything in JavaScript, including the backend, if you've taken like the node pill and you're going like, yes, everything should be written in JavaScript, there are JavaScript bindings of WebDriver, so you can write everything in JavaScript, and so it can be turtles all the way down. But if you're working with a team who are also writing in Java or C# or Python or Ruby, you should be working in those languages, as well, because that allows you to express a certain amount of intent that you can share with your developers. And when the tests fail, you want to go up to the developers and go like, this test is failing, and they can read it and go, well, of course it's failing, this is absolute garbage. Or whatever it is that they say. Hopefully your developers are a bit friendlier than that. The other takeaway is, like, you really shouldn't be writing that many Selenium tests. I will say it again, like every time I'm up on stage, I will say this. You shouldn't really be writing that many. Unit tests and integration tests are super important. Like Richard's talk this morning, where he was exposing like the different shapes of the testing pyramids that you might have, or the testing structures, demonstrates that. There's different kinds of testing that you should be doing. And if the only kind of testing you're doing is end-to-end testing, you have some serious problems that you need to address.
I'd like to remind that parts of Selenium are essentially JavaScript code. They are called Selenium atoms. And yes, if browser vendors were providing us with more sophisticated, more powerful functions to perform the same actions, we would use them, of course, but we cannot. That is the reason why we wrote these complicated atoms.
Okay, cool. I'd like to now do one of these famous questions where we rotate through everyone. I want to get, if you have an opinion, each of your opinions on, like, what are you looking most forward to once the W3C standard is finally 100% released by the browsers and most of the tests are passing? What are you looking forward to the most in terms of like being able to delete code and seeing a big change in the world or that kind of thing?
Probably most backwards compatible with the options where we can switch between different protocols. Well, it's already in there right now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if we have everything that's compatible, well, that's good. We're looking forward for all the APIs that are that passes. I know Jim Evans has a neat dashboard that shows status of the current browser findings. So yeah.
The Herald.
The Herald.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a little bit less optimistic. So most of the W3C documents, so they call them living documents, just because they always evolve with no technology. And same WebDriver will probably be the same. There's gonna be new stuff that the browsers can do that WebDriver should be able to replicate. So it's just gonna be like a tireless chase against browsers' features and trying to cover them through WebDriver.
Thing I'm looking forward to the most is probably the bidirectional stuff that we covered at great length at this year's W3C meeting.
So the question is, what I'm looking forward to most when the W3C spec is implemented by browser vendors? And well, we're there. I mean, we're already there. And in Selenium 4, we're already seeing the thing that I'm looking forward to most, which is I can get rid of a whole lot of stuff where I had to use the old open source legacy version of the wire protocol versus the W3C spec compliant version of the wire protocol that's used to communicate between the language bindings and the browser drivers themselves, meaning Chrome driver, Gecko driver, and so on. That's, in terms of simplifying and making things easier to understand and maintain for anyone who wants to go and read that code, that's the thing that I have looked forward to most often. And we're already mostly there in the alphas.
Pass. No, honestly, I have nothing further to add to that, but yes. Ditto.
So I probably have a slightly different angle than the rest of the people on stage for this, because I don't do that much work on Selenium anymore, but I have done quite a substantial work on the driver side, on Gecko driver, so I work for Mozilla. Before that, I worked for Opera, so I've sort of been involved in writing WebDriver implementations for the better half of it's close to 15 years now. Yeah, long time. And so I think you're entirely right. This is a living standard, and it's not going to stop evolving. I think that one of the challenges that faces in the standardization process, which I've talked to a lot of people at this conference, and everyone says, we need more features in WebDriver. Why are you so slow at adding them? And I think that one of the problems with standardization processes is that they inherently take a long time. And so I think probably the biggest challenge that faces us, especially when it comes to implementation of the BiDi stuff, so for those who don't know, there's a big discussion about adding a bidirectional protocol into WebDriver, because there's lots of testing scenarios that you guys want to be able to test, which we at Mozilla and Firefox get loads of feature requests about. You want to get at the driver logs, you want to get at the console logs, you want to get at the JavaScript logs, you want performance logs, all kinds of logs and stuff that it is hard for us to provide through the kind of request-response model that WebDriver currently uses. And so if you in your test would be able to go, wait until this DOM event fires, or let me subscribe to JavaScript logs so I can see which JavaScript errors are being triggered when you load a document, that sort of thing, would be brilliant. And so I think Jim is correct that we are at nearly 100% implementation state of WebDriver. We have a solid test suite that Mozilla has contributed quite substantial amounts of time and energy into. So I think for us as a browser vendor, and some of the maintainers of GeckoDriver are sitting here in the front row, that right now, this has given us lots of time to sort of fix a lot of those outstanding bugs whilst we're trying to figure out what the next step is going to be. And so, for example, later tonight, or possibly early tomorrow morning, we're releasing a new GeckoDriver with support for Android, for Fennec, for Firefox on Android. And that's really exciting for us because we haven't had time to work on this because we've been, pushing the standard and implementing the W3C spec. So, yeah, that was a lot, wasn't it? I'll give you some time to digest that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll echo. I know that the standardization process takes a really long time. I've done it at another project. So it's almost like, oh, we finally got the rubber stamp, but we finished the work a really long time ago. So that can feel a little like, oh. But for us, we're always really excited to see the W3C recommend more free and open source software for people to use in their work, and so that's always exciting for us. So we'll have a little cake, even if it feels like all the work's done when we get the news.
Yeah, so I like the question, when WebDriver will be complete. It's like asking, right. Well, it's like asking, oh, I need to know when the page is finished loading. I'm like, that. Right. That means nothing today because that doesn't mean anything on a lot of single-page apps. But yeah, there are a lot of features that I'm looking forward to getting added in the WebDriver standard. Several that have been agreed on by everyone and haven't gone anywhere yet. So I just made my first PR to WebDriver spec last week. So definitely excited to keep working on that, and would love to have more people that might be interested in working with specification and ideas for things going forward.
I'm going to ask you to follow up on that in just a minute, the pull request you made, but I'd like to hear Alexi first.
Don't we all?
Yeah, my only dream to make it work, to keep it work, and I'm really happy, really excited when our continuous integration server is green and every day. Yeah.
It's always hard to be the last one because you think about an answer and then somebody says that. Sorry. No, but I thought about a different one. Actually, the part that I kind of makes me sad about that having everything now working is that people sometimes want to have new features, new things, standardized things, And as we remember, like the first browsers to be standard was like Firefox, and thanks to also to the work of Jim, like the Internet Explorer. But now most of the people test with Chrome, and when Chrome got to be a standard, people complained that things are not working anymore because we like to keep doing things the old way. So aside from the things having everything passing, we need to find a way how to spread all this knowledge and the status of that we are a standard like in a more efficient way, so people don't have a hassle trying to change or upgrade their tests when everything is working in a standard. So that's like the part that I find interesting. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'd like to follow up on Titus. Like he said, he submitted a PR for the spec, and it's interesting to me both from a process perspective as well as the actual feature. It's the script pinning thing that came out of the TPAC, right? So I don't want to get too deep into what TPAC did, what it was, but there are a few things that came out of it that will result in material changes to how WebDriver works. And I mean, we could talk about a different one, but I felt like the script pinning, since we've already talked about bidirectional, would be a good one to just cover in terms of how it affects people in general, because I think it's really interesting. So can you talk a little bit more about your PR to script pinning?
Oh yeah, well the idea is, especially when we standardize on things, there are things like visibility that resulted in some conversations that took a long time at various TPACs and really couldn't be resolved because what does it mean to be displayed? That's not an easy question to answer. And
Sounds easy, but it's not easy.
Right, not at all. And so it wasn't included in the spec. And so now the Selenium code has to send a 44 kilobyte atom whenever someone asks for visibility right now. And I know we have another implementation that we're working on to avoid that, but things like that. There are a lot of JavaScript requests that are large that keep, like think of Protractor, they send that huge synchronization JavaScript code. So the idea is pin a JavaScript to the driver once and then reference that in all of your tests going forward is the basic idea. So it's mostly and this is something where the browser vendor is like, why do we need that? And it's like, well, and that's a legitimate question. And it's like, well, our users need that if they're going to run remotely. So everyone using a grid, everyone using, a service, Sauce Labs. For example. Could really, latency is a huge deal. And every time you're sending a huge packet across the wire, that slows everything down. And so just making the lives easier for the people actually using WebDriver, Selenium, other implementations is hugely important.
Let me tack on a quick comment to tack on to the end of what Titus was talking about. He's talking about creating a pull request to the actual WebDriver spec itself. While the WebDriver specification is approved and worked on by a working group within the W3C. All of that work is done out in the open. It's done that it's accessible to anyone in this room. The spec repository is on GitHub. If you have a feature request that you'd like, something that you think would be cool to see as part of the specification, you can submit an issue against the specification. We may ask for more clarification as how do you exactly see this feature working and so on, but it's important to recognize that this is not some backfilled room where a group of people just get together and say, okay, this is what it's going to be. All of this stuff happens in the open, and you're more than welcome to engage in that process by participating in via GitHub or via an IRC channel or there are many mechanisms through which you can help contribute to the WebDriver specification from the W3C.
So, Jim, where would you tell someone who maybe has just come to their first Selenium Conf to start? Like, if they were like, that sounds like an awesome thing, where would they start? The
first place I would tell them to look would be in the GitHub repository for the W3C specification, which is I can't say the URL out in it's github.com W3C WebDriver, I believe it is where it is, and that would be the first place to start. There's an issue tracker there. There is the source code or the actual source of the spec document itself is there, and that would be a great place to start.
We we actually have Christian Broman from Source Labs, who's not here, I believe, but he's also developing some new contribution documentation specifically to make sure that the process stays open. Also, I think you'll find, if you read the minutes, there was Apple that was against script pinning. No, you looked at me. But
I apologize.
I'm really excited about script pinning. But there's like an open question when it comes to script pinning, because if you allow the driver to be instrumented with a chunk of JavaScript, you might also consider, can we share that same infrastructure for also doing some other cool things? For example, one of the things that a lot of testers come to me and say is, I'm using React, and React is generating element IDs that are completely insane. And they change all the time. How can I identify my React component or something in my React tree in an easy way without having to muck about with XPath or something worse? And
There's something worse.
And so one of the things we discussed at TPAC in relation to script pinning, imagine if you were given element locator extensions. So you would be able to say, actually use a React locator when trying to locate this element. And you can already do this kind of on the client side today, but it involves multiple trips across the wire, which is rather expensive. Instead, you could have the driver, or possibly even the framework. Imagine if the React team were to supply with their testing framework some kind of extension locator that you could just use for free if you had, if you were automating a React app. And so I think there are lots of sort of small, tiny usability improvements that we can do in addition to the BIDO work, which I'm terribly excited about. But we have some sharp corners to look at as well.
So we just talked about how to contribute to the spec itself, and that might seem a little bit academic, a little bit esoteric to some folks, because it's a blueprint, right? It's a blueprint, it's a template, it's an idea. What about for just getting started contributing to the actual Selenium project, the code itself that people use and see all the time? There's two questions about this. One is general, one is more about bindings in new languages like Kotlin, Swift, that kind of thing. Curious about if there's a difference between the two, or how would you answer that?
So back in the day, when all this was actually still a megacity, the way you got into open source was that through scratching your own itch. There was something that didn't quite work the way you wanted it to, and so you went and fixed that one particular thing, and that was good, and that's how you made your first contribution. You found the sort of the rough edge, the thing where it was there's a bug, there's a thing that's not working. So if you want to get involved, the easiest way is to find the thing that irritates you the most, where you go, if only they added this flag, or if there was this command, or if it worked in this way. Find that, do that. Come and chat to us. There is the Selenium IRC channel, and I realize not everyone here is a million years old, and Slack is the new way that we use CPU and memory on our computers. And there's a Slack channel as well that people can sign up to. And there's Selenium Conf, and there's the mailing lists, which aren't as high traffic as they used to be, but they're still there, right? Or Twitter, just tweet out and go SHS96E or Jim Evans or Selenium HQ. This is all rubbish, but if you did this, I'd love it. So that's one way. New language bindings, write them, and then come and have a chat with us, and we can think about merging them into the tree. Facebook manage the PHP bindings, and they're quite happy outside of the tree. We have let a conversation stall about getting Go bindings into the main tree, and I should really pick that up. And I've been rubbish, by the way, about having that conversation, because I'm not good at
all
email.
Your free time.
Should someone email you?
Yeah, never email me directly. It's not just an egotistical thing. It's because I am genuinely rubbish at email. I barely know how to type Gmail. And then I open it up and there are so many thousands of unread messages. It's oof. Looks nice. Close. But yeah, scratch your own itch, get involved. If you want to do a language binding, start doing a language binding. Come and have a chat with us in the Slack channel about like how you can implement the protocol and stuff like that. We're here to help. And if you want to merge it into the tree, then also come and have a chat with us.
I just want to. Okay.
A lot of projects do this thing where they tag bugs for beginners in some way with a flag or some other way that's searchable. So if you were like, I actually don't know enough to have an itch yet, but it seemed like these folks all seem nice, I want to get involved. Are there bugs tagged like that?
Sporadically there are.
Okay.
And then we solve them and then we forget to tag more. We are pretty good at tagging bugs with languages that they're specific for. Mm-hmm. So if you're a .NET developer, just find the .NET bugs and try and find one that looks reasonable.
Yeah, that was very helpful for me getting started, those exact tags.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's also, on GitHub, we're using GitHub projects to manage the Selenium 4 release so you can see what's happening. And if you're really desperate for Selenium 4 to ship, it'd be nice, right? Take a look at those. They're all linked to issues, so then pick up one of those and run with it. And there are some fun ones to get involved with there. And if you ever need a hand understanding the code or why it's written that way, come and talk to us. We're on the Slack channel. We're here to help. Or come to the Fix a Bug, Become a Committer workshop, which is happening tomorrow and happens at every Selenium Conf, where we walk through everything from the build tool to checking out the code to building it to walking through the structure and working with the IDE and all the other good bits and pieces.
And I just wanted to add that one of the things that I recommend to people who are interested in starting out, if maybe you don't have an itch to scratch directly, run the tests. Some of them are going to fail. Some of them are going to fail on Windows. Run them on Windows. Figure out why it's failing. Use that to walk through the code and figure out what might be going on. We're constantly making changes, and like all software, we make unintentional changes to things. And
just find out where Simon forgot to escape his backslashes. That's how you fix a Windows problem.
So anyway, running tests is awesome and a great way to learn a code base. And so I highly recommend leveraging the tests, because we have really good tests for Selenium overall.
Yeah, okay.
I also want to do a plug that, Mozilla is an open source project. So a large chunk of what used to live in Selenium now lives in Chrome driver, in Gecko driver, in Safari driver. And this is also all open source. And if you find like a foundational bug in what you believe to be the driver, chances are the bug is going to be, hidden somewhere in Gecko driver. So, if you like Rust, that's a good place to get started. Just wanted to mention that. Also, I think that it's good to have people fix bugs and contribute to your code. I also think we as testers have a really big responsibility to make sure we test in all browsers, because you touched on it earlier. But one of the biggest threats facing this Selenium community and the base for the reason why we're doing Selenium is that is Chrome's market share. So please make sure you test your web applications in all browsers. You have the opportunity to do so. And if you find interoperability problems between the way Chrome driver works or Safari driver or Gecko driver, that is really, really a high priority for us to fix. Because for Mozilla, it's a matter of existence. For us, web compatibility, because we're a fairly small browser in terms of market share, we need our browser to work on all websites. And you guys can help with that.
Yeah.
There is a problem with fixing bugs by community. If we have a bug in our tracker and we see it is easy to fix, it's low-hanging fruit, and we know how to fix it, we fix it immediately. And the other bugs are not so easy to fix. But even if you don't don't know how to dig the code, how to fix a bug, there is one important thing you can help us with. It's triaging bugs. sometimes we just cannot reproduce bugs. We know that some people have issues, but we don't know how to reproduce it, so we cannot fix it. So the first thing you can help us with is adding information to existing bug reports. Adding reproducing examples, adding some additional information about environments where it can be reproduced, where it cannot be reproduced. But don't write +1 or it fails for me too. It is not helpful information. Helpful information should provide some additional data for us. We will be grateful for this information, people.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have been super technical here, and we've talked about fixing bugs and code and things like that. There is way more to the project than just endless amounts of ASCII in an editor, right? Like, there is the Selenium conference, which is put together by a group of magnificent people with far more energy and patience than I will ever have, right? And there's documentation. I am too impatient to write, and yet we need documentation, because your first instance with the encounter with the project is like, hey, look, what about this? And, you know, the website is, you know, a thing of beauty. And you know, help with that would be very much appreciated. And organizing Selenium user group meetups and helping feed the community and helping answer questions on the Slack channel or Stack Overflow or anything like that. Like, you don't have to be contributing code to be contributing to the project. There are so many valuable things that people do that are, in fact, more important in several cases than just writing yet another patch, right? And it's things that I'm not very good at, but there are some people on this stage, Ashley, Marcus, Diego, Manoj, who are magnificent at it, right? And we should really appreciate that. Deb as well, the SFC, those contributions.
Yeah, I just want to add shortly that we redid the documentation, so we added more languages, so you can have it in Spanish, in Russian, in Chinese, and so on. So you don't need to write new code. You can just basically help us to read the English translation and put it in your own language. And if you want to propose a new one, pull requests are welcome. So that's a new way to also include different people from different countries, races, etc., etc. So we did that also.
Speaking of documentation, I just wanted to mention there's also a forthcoming description of WebDriver on MDN on the Mozilla Developer Network, where I presume you already know about this. It's rather rudimentary, but that also is a place where we can start helping out.
Cool. Sorry, I'm trying to live curate here. I wanted to follow up a little bit, but we're running out of time, so we need to see if we can try to go into the speed round. But for Deb, I'm curious how you view the difference between community-driven projects like Selenium versus single company hosted. It's a little bit like Mozilla, although I suspect Mozilla has a lot of contributors. But I'm thinking of some other projects that look open source, but they're actually, I don't even know how to consider it.
Yeah, so Conservancy is a nonprofit that is a home for community-driven projects like Selenium, and I love community-driven projects because the goal isn't like, oh, how can we screw over our competitor, or how can we make this really annoying so we can charge people extra money for us to fix it for them. Where as community-driven projects, like, we're all looking at each other. So if you're like, oh, can you make this better for me? And it's like, cool, well, let's talk about it. So I really love the feel of community-driven projects, and I really like the sort of like collaborative decision-making that goes along with that in building something that's not just for one company's gain, but for like everyone who uses its gain. So that's kind of what drives my work at Conservancy, and I suspect my coworkers feel similarly. But you know, we love working with community-driven projects. That's what we do, and Selenium's a great example. They're doing lots of things great. Like, look at all these people that came to just hear us talk. So fantastic. And I'm sure they have more questions now.
Probably. One thing that's interesting to me is that sometimes I think some particular people on the stage get treated as though they work for Selenium Inc. and that they owe something and people come in guns blazing and they're like, why the hell haven't you fixed this stupid thing?
Like, I want my money back. And
Yeah.
it's like, wait, how much did you pay for Selenium again?
So it's difficult to sometimes rectify. We want people to ascribe best intentions to us, that we actually have day jobs. None of us are getting paid for this, and it's interesting. I just wanted to, I don't know how to remind people that this is a completely volunteer-led project, and that it's driven by love and elbow grease and in some cases inertia. And
yeah, it's more when you ask a volunteer-driven group to do something for you, it's less in the spirit of, I want to speak to a manager, and a little more like, hey, can you watch my really nasty, obstreperous cat that will probably claw your feet off when you come in to feed it every day all next week. So it's like, a little like recognizing you're asking for a favor as opposed to like value for the money you've already paid.
it just seems to me like a lot of these folks here have their head in the code all the time. They know every nook and cranny. So if you're telling them there's a bug, they either know or they never, ever, ever thought that what you're asking for was possible or a good idea. So I mean, it's yeah. So getting to kind of the end of our questions, I'm curious. I'm not sure who to ask this. I'll just see who wants to say. But what do you think the future of leadership in the Selenium project looks like?
Anyone but Simon, since he said he's leaving, right? Yeah. Ooh, who should we give this to? Ashley's holding the mic.
No, I'm not.
Yes,
You are in fact holding the mic. You are in fact holding the microphone.
Well, it won't be a mass exodus of leaders. God, I hope not. There's a lot of things that I think we need moving forward. We've all been, going on the backs of giants here, just between Simon, Jim, Alexi, everybody's contributions, Manoj. It's terrifying, when you lose leadership. Anybody, whether you're on an open source project, whether you're at a company, change is really hard. So I think it's exciting. Terrifying. My introversion's coming. But, I think in some ways we need to think, all right, without Simon in the future, how do we move forward? We need to answer that question. What is our guidance? What is our guiding light? Really rethinking through what is our charter and mission as a community. Do we need to, and God, there's an episode of Silicon Valley, God, this just became a job. But do we need to really consider having not necessarily product ownership, but that leadership and vision to help guide the things that we should be working on still in a fun way? Because if it's not fun, don't be part of it. But it should be fun, but we still need that guidance. And I think that's something where a lot of projects, a lot of communities might lack at times, and where they start to see that thread fall apart and start to fray when they lose that. So my 2 cents.
I just want to add that we should also have a governance model where the project describes itself how it can be run independently of the person who is sitting in the committee or as a committer, to guarantee that the project lives on for many more years. And based on that, this will give us way more transparency. I think we're very accessible by Twitter, Slack, IRC, but having something written down on how we work as a community, as a team, will help us more. And I think this is something that could be the next step that we could achieve, so Simon can sleep calmly during night, that his son is in good care.
So, about that new website, when do you think it's going to ship, Manoj?
Can we do now?
I think we should do it right now.
All right, let's have a drum roll. There we go.
Oh. Thank you, Jim. Manoj, Diego, not all heroes wear capes. But you two have single-handedly pushed this through. You've done so much work on it. I am blown away and astonished. So I actually have a cape for each of you.
Right?
As a little thank you.
Can I exchange the colors? Like
Yes, of
red?
course. Okay, you can fight it out between yourselves.
Well, it matches with the theme there. So.
But Manoj, I'd love to hear more about the website. So maybe you could tell us some more about it?
Sure. Thanks, Ab. Yeah, I've been working on so I think the first we started announcing during a keynote in India last year. And then we have been working through with a couple of people. So I would like to mention Monica and Luke, the two main people that we worked with in having the new website. So the new website is going to be completely on a new, the framework that we built with. It's called Hugo. You can spin it up within a couple of seconds. It's super easy and nice. We already had the documentation running up as part of GitHub pages, and Diego single-handedly helped move that to Hugo documentation. And literally just this afternoon, we merged the documentation and then with the new site. And there we go, we have the live website now.
And with that, we are about out of time. I want to thank every one of you because you're all amazing. And let's give it a hand for our panel here.